see. 200,000 people were thrown out of their homes, their villages and towns, and they raped, they killed, and we're still waiting for justice to be brought to the Cypriot people. This is a case that it should be brought into the International Criminal Court of Justice. We haven't yet succeeded to do that. But as you know, justice has no time limit. This is the struggle that continues and will continue as long as we'll achieve that justice for Cyprus. We aim for a unified Cyprus for all the Cypriots, Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots, Latins, Maronites, and all the other people that are the right residents of this beautiful island. Tonight we have the mayor of the occupied Kyrenia, Mr. Glafkos Kariolou, who has dedicated most of his life to bring awareness of what happened in Cyprus, especially Kyrenia, which is a very, very beautiful city in the, is it the north or middle of Cyprus?
The middle of the north.
Middle of the north. That the Turks have occupied and have evicted all the citizens. There are hardly any Greek Cypriots.
None.
What was the population of Greek Cypriots in Kyrenia, Glafkos?
5,000.
5,000. Now there's nobody there. They're all refugees. Well, Glafkos he comes from a family that they were seafarers, and his father was a famous diver in Kyrenia, who lost his life when he was trying to save the life of another Canadian diver who came to Cyprus, and somehow his mask of oxygen of the Canadian diver was not functioning, and he took off his mask to give it to him, and then unfortunately he was drowned. So it's a great family, and we welcome Glafkos to Theatro Technis. His talk today is about the ancient ship of Kyrenia and the Kyrenia Liberty project. Glafkos, would you join us and start your talk? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Glafkos. I consider it as a great honor to be with you tonight. I have been listening to stories from David Eftiguru about his Theatro Technis. I didn't know what it was. I've heard so much about your efforts, and really and honestly, it is a great honor to be here tonight with you. And I will try to travel you and see and show you why do we love Kyrenia. I come from the town of Kyrenia, and there you see the ancient ship of Kyrenia. The story begins in Kyrenia. This is where the town of Kyrenia is, 43 nautical miles away from the minor Asian coast. And you can see, because you've probably been listening about the hydrocarbons findings, there you can see Eratosthenes Mount, and this is where everything is happening now. So, back in 1965, Andreas Kariolou was diving, cultivating sponges, and as his anchor was dragging due to a northerly storm, as we call it, Tramontana, he had to follow the anchor. He was down to 33 meters using Aquila, and suddenly he saw this small boulder of amphora. When he surfaced in 1965, the sea was rough, and until he managed to start the engine of his boat, the vessel shifted more than 150, 200 meters away. So when the sea was calm, he could not find the wreck again. So he spent more than 200 dives, or 1.5 years, to find again the shipwreck in 1967. And in 1968, a tremendous team of archaeologists, underwater archaeologists, joined the Department of Archaeology of Cyprus, and they started diving down to 33 meters with the financial assistance of the National Geographic Society. After 3 years of diving, at the time I was 17 years old, and I was the youngest diver that I was assisting in the recovery of the amphoras. And there you can see why the Kyrenia ship is unique in the world. You can see this diver standing on top of the wooden hull of the vessel. So when they analyzed this wood, they found out that it was cut from trees from Pinus rudea. That is a special pine that it is cultivated in Cyprus up in the Trogos mountain. And the pines were cut at 380 BC before Christ. The ship was 4.3 meters wide, 14.7 meters long, and it has a tremendous cargo. We are going to see it now. There you can see 29 millstones carved on volcanic rock from Nisiros, 380 Rhodian amphorae. And there you can see a tiny little list of the various paraphernalia that they discovered on board. That is a very strange key. You can imagine, we are talking about the time of Alexander the Great, obviously. It's about 300 BC, and you can imagine what kind of sophisticated iron lock they had to operate with this key. This is 1, 2, 3 views of the same key, and it helps you realize the complicated structure of this lock. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 pins opening this very strange lock. Unfortunately, no lock was discovered, just a key. More than 10,000 almonds, again analyzed with the carbon-14 method. They discovered that they were cut from the trees around 280 BC. So there is a difference of 100 years between 380 to 280 BC. And there, the most significant find was the method of construction. The ancient Greeks were using the opposite way as we use nowadays. Nowadays we build boats, and we are going to see how, with frames first. In antiquity, they used to build boats shell first, meaning that they used to carve each plank and then putting inside each plank these tenons made out of oak into the pine tree, into the pine wood frames, into the pine wood beams, sorry. And there you can see the ancient boat builders. There you can see the harmonias, the square holes, and the tenons going on. And this is how they used to build. This is some more details to help you understand how in antiquity they were making these boats, these vessels. This is a very strange finding. They call it the Kers tablet. They never found what it was written inside this Kers tablet. It's a mystery. The Kyrenia ship became extremely famous because 60% of its shell, of its hull, was intact, preserved by mud and seaweed. The ship was rediscovered and was reassembled in the castle of Kyrenia. And the works have been going on and on until 1973. In 1985, in Greece, the Institute for the Preservation of Nautical Tradition of Greece decided to actually rebuild or build an exact replica of the ancient ship of Kyrenia, and they came up with the Kyrenia II. Kyrenia number 2, this is sailing in the port of Yokohama. She was transported on a big container ship. She was unloaded in the port of Yokohama, rigged by the crew, and sailed inside the port of Yokohama. The first exact, authentic replica to 85% to sail in the port of Yokohama and in the world. The ship also sailed from Cyprus, from Greece to Cyprus, and from Cyprus to Greece. This is a part of a trip at 10 before, that's gusting 30 knots of wind, approximately 80 nautical miles out of the island of Rhodos. And there you can see some views. Now, during the experiments, there were a plethora of very critical questions that had to be answered in order to assist nautical archaeologists. Many questions about the sailing, the ability of the ship to go into the wind, and why, the major question was, why did we kept breaking our steering oars? The ship was steered by 2 steering oars. So, in order to discover the answers to these questions, we had to construct a second replica. After the wear and tear of the first replica, we couldn't use it. She was taking so much water inside, and she was placed in a museum in Agia Naba in Cyprus on a permanent exhibition. But the experiments had to go on. So in 2002, we constructed an exact corrected replica of the ship of Kyrenia called Kyrenia Liberty, and she was launched on the 10th of November 2002 with the frames first method. There you can see the contemporary traditional method that we use nowadays to build wooden boats. There you can see the trip from Cyprus, from the ancient port of Amathus, all the way to the Olympics, the 2004 Olympics in Athens. You can see how many ports. We tried to use the ancient route of the ancient mariners, but it took us more than 20 days to do that. There is the crew. This is myself when I was young. And that's arriving at the island of Rhodos, passing under Sunia. Now, many questions. Look what we had on the first experimental ship. Always we used to break the steering oars. So we had to answer the questions. We needed a huge team of volunteers. We had to reconstruct the initial cargo, because most of the cargo still is in the castle of Kyrenia under the Turkish occupation army. So we had to construct again 380 amphoras. You will see them in a while. And in order to discover what the ancient mariners used to do with their steering oars, we had to do a little bit of mathematics and naval architecture and iconographic analysis. Iconographic analysis was extremely difficult because, as you see, all those ships are warships. We had to find a cargo ship, an ancient cargo ship of the time of Alexander the Great, which was very difficult. And there you can see the only icon, the only drawing that we discovered of an ancient cargo ship, a merchant ship. This is Kyrenia Liberty, and this is the ancient icon. Unfortunately, we could not have a lot of information out of this, as you can imagine. However, we had to use what we had. And there you can see the ratio of the low water line with the distance between the steering rudder or the steering oar touching the sea, the distance between what we call this point where the vessel touches the sea, we call it after perpendicular, and we compare this distance with this distance. And this is the result. So, the ancient mariners used to have 16.8% the distance between the steering oar and the after perpendicular. Look what we have, 3.2 only. So that helped us, together with the nautical archaeologists, to find out the correct position of the steering oar. And there you can see the old position of Kyrenia 2, and this is the new position of Kyrenia Liberty, and the result is quite fantastic. There is the Kyrenia 2, the ability of turning of Kyrenia Liberty is this one, and the ability of turning of Kyrenia 2 is this one. So many other discoveries we managed to find with the ship replica of Kyrenia. There you can see I'm passing very, very quickly to various slides to show you the meticulous work that we had to do with both ships, the Kyrenia 2 and the Kyrenia Liberty. And you can see the differences as we continuously experiment. Now, how did ancient mariners change their course? Square riggers, meaning ships with a square sail, are very difficult to sail. This is what we do nowadays with modern sailing yachts. If the wind is blowing from the blue arrows, this is what we do. And please follow with me the red arrow. Look at the red arrow. We go into the wind and then we tack. We just turn into the wind. The ancient mariners, it was impossible to do that. They would destroy the controlling lead rings of their sail. And this is what they did. Look at the red arrow as they change course. The red arrow, the ship goes as close as possible to the wind, and suddenly the skipper is turning the boat away from the wind, and it does an ancient Greek letter gamma shape in order to change course. If he didn't do that, he would lose his sail. And this is what happens to the captain that will decide to tack. You can see those little things that you can see sewn on the sail are lead rings. 167 lead rings were found on the ship. And this old lady is sewing some lead rings that were destroyed by strong wind outside of Astibare. So you can see why we have 10 braids. Braids are these 10 ropes that they are controlling the sail. You can see this icon is 300 years before Christ. This is 510 years before Christ, and this is 200 years before Christ. Different people, yet they draw exactly the same thing. 10 braids. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 10 braids, 10 braids, 10 braids. Therefore, we have 10 braids. So, experiments continue. You can see a lot of analysis of the square sail. This is probably the first polar diagram, as we call it, of a ship from the time of Alexander the Great. And there you can see the wind blowing from 0 degrees. It means that the ship cannot sail into the wind. 15 degrees, cannot sail on 30 degrees, cannot sail 45 or 60 or 75 degrees, just about. And then on 90 degrees, meaning that when the wind is blowing from the side of the ship, then you can see that we gain some speed, 3 knots. And then as we open into the wind and as we start having the wind blowing from behind us, then the speed increases and it comes to 4 knots. And this is the explanation of this diagram. This is a more complicated polar diagram under various wind conditions. So there you can see the ship sailing from Cyprus to Greece outside Samos, going to Chios, force 4, speed 5.9 to 6.2 knots. Just an ocean-going modern yacht. It was quite amazing for us and for the scientists to see this. You can see some more pictures of details. And there you can see the ship experimenting in the Bay of Limassol in Cyprus, fully loaded with the experimental load. And I can show you the nephew of Mr. George Eugeniou, Marinos Sekilis, is standing here helping us. He's the second in command of the ship. And there you can see some more answers to the question, why did you have to put this wooden part there? There you can see it on an icon, and there on board the ship. And there you can see fairleads on the yard, and there you can see fairlead of the yard. So it was summer, probably 300 BC. The ship was fully loaded in Kyrenia port, overloaded, I must admit, and as she was sailing out of the port of Kyrenia with an axis, the ship axis, down to approximately 45 to 50 degrees, which means heading towards northeast, suddenly she sank to 33 meters. We were very lucky because she sank on a boulder of mud, and the mud prevented oxygen from attacking the wood. So we believe that the ship was sailing with cargo to Syria. There you can see the experimental cargo of amphorae. You can see all this procedure to reconstruct all the amphoras and load them, and use a timing device to see how long does it take to fill an amphora, to load an amphora, to pile it inside the cargo area of the ship. There you can see the procedures. This is loading millstones on board, sewing, repairing the sail, putting wine into the amphoras and millstone. There you can see the amphoras being loaded, and look at this, an army of amphoras piled up just before loading the amphoras on board. The experiments went on and on for many months and many years. Our mission intends to go as far as Lebanon and to go with the initial route of the ship. We are prevented, however, by the Turkish invasion. I am a Kyrenian, I'm the mayor of Kyrenia, my hometown is there, my property is there, our cultural heritage, as you have seen, is there, enslaved under the Turkish army. And we are trying to find ways to go back home. It is very difficult, it will take time, it will take a lot of losing of dignity, unfortunately. But the target must always be there, to return back home. And there I will show you, this is a new shipwreck at Mazodos, at Gideon, it's called Gideon Shipwreck, 300 BC. The voyage of the experiments and the ship of Kyrenia, the voyage will continue until we manage to go back home into Kyrenia. I thank you very much.
έρωτα του Αγγής. Εδώ.
You know, this is Hellenism, which the occupation tries to destroy. The structure of the Turkish culture of the Cypriot people that goes beyond Alexander the Great, the 5th century BC, and beyond the modern times. The Turkification of Cyprus, the 1/3 of Cyprus, began 40 years ago. And we have to really fight and tell the world that this crime should be stopped and should be punished until Glafkos and all the Kyrenians can go back to Kyrenia. Thank you very much.
Thank you.